Hey everybody, it's your old pal Chuck, and today we're back with another review, taking a look at the big Mama Jama right in front of you. This is Combiner Wars Sky Rain, and it kind of looks like his head's getting chopped off a little, but we'll fix that up in a minute. I got these from seller off of a Facebook group, but they should be showing up in stores now. As you can see, here, let me just adjust it ever so slightly so we can get a good, nice look at them. Sky Rain is another one of those G1 repaints. There we go. We're taking a look at the upper torso now. Made up of Stunticons and Combaticons that have been repainted into Season 1 G1 characters. This time for limbs we have Wheeljack, Hound, Smokescreen, and Trailbreaker. And yes, I said Trailbreaker, we have the name back. The new figure of this is, of course, the torso, which is Lynx, who has had a lot of his gimmicks neutered to become Sky Rain. Basically, the shuttle and carrier bits don't separate, but they were able to maintain the Lynx head. Cool thing about the figure is the sword here. I gotta say, I mean, I've been getting really tired of Transformers featuring melee weapons. But sure enough, they come out with this. This is made out of bits that were part of Sky Lynx's tail. It does slot one into the other, just like that. You can also have the figures dual wield them as daggers and what have you, but it's kind of cool. And really does work for the figure. Unfortunately, the one thing I'm a little disappointed about is you cannot peg it into the hole in the palm of Hound's limb module. If you remember, you could do that with Rook and his little device there. And that has to do with the fact that the handle here on either bit is just a little too long, and these pegs here, unfortunately, the way they're placed is that they're a little too wide. Now, I have to say, just based on stability alone, I'd have to put Sky Lynx as an excellent torso. I actually have to put him number 2 behind Superion. You don't have the bow-leggedness here in the hips that you would have with the Motormaster mold, the Hotspot mold. The one complaint, and unfortunately it's not just me, is that this hip is very loose. There's basically no ratcheting there at all, going forward and back. Lateral movement, yes. Other than that, any other little intricacies we'll get into with the figure individually, which we're going to do right now. Okay, starting off, we're going to look at Trail Cutter, because out of all these figures, I feel Trail Cutter has the most going on with him in terms of stuff with the mold. This is the off-road mold that was used for Ironhide, and it's going to be used for War Breakdown in Japan, and was retooled into First Aid, you know, for Defensor. Personally, I think that mold would have worked better for Trailbreaker. It is nice that he does have his name back. As you can see right here, it does have a new head. And they did go ahead and retool the forearms. On this side, we have the traditional Trailbreaker cannon. And on the other side, just a new, you know, forearm and fist. And there you just saw one of my problems with this mold. That I think I can say now with all certainty, with this being the final wave, I have never gotten a version of this mold that did not have hips that were looser than make your own joke. I mean, this is just never happened, and it's very disheartening. What is tighter now is how everything clips together to the point where you almost feel like you're breaking the figure. One thing I want to focus on is the limb module, because this is something that, going back to San Diego Comic-Con when we first saw the figures, we were introduced to. As you can see, there's a lot going on here. Namely, the thumb or heel part has been redesigned and is much thinner and a little, like, just angled differently. The next part is right here, what would be the hand. And as you can see, this has been completely retooled and molded with extra breaker bits and, you know, little stuff molded in, as well as removing the additional fingers, that it's literally just two pieces. Now, a lot of people speculated at the time that all of the limb modules for Skyrain, or Lynx King, as was mentioned on the back of Trailbreaker's comic, I guess that was a working title for the team, would have these new molded parts to make the hands look more like paws. Well, Trail Cutter's the only one. And, I'm sorry, Trailbreaker. Oh, geez, I'm doing it now. If this looks familiar, and it should, it's because this is actually meant to represent the light rig force field generator bit that used to stick out behind the head on the G1 toy, and is actually present on the Thrilling 30 Generations mold. The problem is, this is not shown in the instructions, so many reviewers have tried to find a way to attach this back into the backpack here of Trail Cutter. Well, it doesn't work. From my interviews with toy designers, what I think happened is there was going to be some feature where the inside of that hood cab section would be retooled, that this could slot in properly, you know, folded up like this, and you would have that little force field generator as well as the two little missiles or whatever that were sticking up behind Trail Cutter's head. Probably the budget didn't hold for that, so they left the retooling in on the limb module, but dropped everything else they were supposed to do. That happens. You know, as was explained to me, you can design something one way, and then over time, the design changes and is redone. You know, the design changes because of budget, and stuff that you intended is taken out, and sometimes to the detriment of the figure. For example, Prime Deluxe Arachnid. So, my point being is there's absolutely no way to properly insert this that's not wedging it in and really making you feel like you're going to break something. Also, I should mention that Trailbreaker does come with an axe. It's in the packaging. It has the gun here on the arm. That's really all it needs. Also, that is a 5mm hole. You can stick this in to do like a rook claw thing, but as you can see, there's a lot of molded in detail there, so I would recommend not doing that, just because you could end up scraping some paint or chipping something. So we'll pause and we'll take a look at the vehicle mode. Okay, so you know, it's the same transformation that we've seen before. What's interesting, though, is because of the gun arm, you do have this little silver bit sticking off the back. And the limb module integration works the same. There is a slot there right in the middle that tabs in to the back there. Not pointing fingers at any particular reviewer, but I noticed there were some guys who got this set relatively early who rushed out the review, and I guess never saw any other review of this figure ever, or this mold ever, period, and did not know about that. So, word of advice, take some time, you know, don't rush things out. I mean, I took time just to get to know these, and God knows I'm probably screwing something else up, so. But yeah, it pegs in, and you have that little back part, and like I said, I really think the first aid version of this mold would have worked a little bit better as Trailbreaker. That's twice now. How's the drinking game going at home? So yeah, let's move on and look at another limb. in case you're wondering, we're not going in any specific order. I'm just picking the guys I want to talk about. I'm basically at that point with this whole wave where it's like in line, and just like, nah, whatever. But I gotta say, Hound is actually kind of cool, and I'm kind of glad I picked him because there is a lot going on with this guy. It is more than just a repaint with a new head of Swindle. There is actually a little extra retooling going on, and allow me to show you. Now, before I begin, let me just state, I do not have Swindle. I am waiting for the Unite Warrior set, so I get a blast off that's a rocket ship. So I am only going on of what I've heard. And what I've heard is that this part, where you have these grooves right here on either side, were not molded in. And basically those grooves, as I bring in Hound's weapon, you can see that there are two little nubs right there on the end. And you just... if I can. So difficult. Man strength. There we go. Did I get it? No, I didn't. Oh, no. As you can see, these are supposed to peg in. Now, if of course I am doing it wrong, it's actually not that difficult. Let me just get a little more working room here. There we go. There we go. And as you can see, that little silver cannon can become Hound's shoulder cannon. And it basically sits on an angle like that, and then you can just use the limb module as a nice hand blaster, what have you. That's a nice little touch and an homage to Hound's classic look. Even though, to be honest with you, I tend to remember him with a smaller blaster. And of course, if you don't like it, the gun has a handle you can peg into his hand. You can peg this into one of the shoulders, and there you go. Other than that, there's really not much more to this mold. It's Rook, it's Swindle. So let's take a look at the vehicle mode. Okay, and here's Hound in its combat Jeep mode. I mean, this is just basically Swindle's mode. I think it works better for Swindle than it does Hound, but what do you want? And of course, since this is actually all fairly new tooling, I think this is actually a new limb piece. I'm not sure. I don't remember what Rooks look like, but it does have the hole there that you can peg it in and basically armor up Hound. And then, if you're wondering what do you do with his shoulder cannon gun thing, there's a hole right there that you can actually peg it in on top, and you can do some like dynamic stuff where one points one way, one points the other way. Keep in mind that you would have to have the heel thumb piece sticking out a little, but it is nice to have and rolls quite nicely. I'll be honest, I think this is between Trailbreaker and Hound. I think these are like my two favorites of the wave. Alright, so let's move on and take a look at another limb. And here's Smokescreen, and I gotta say I'm not entirely in love with this repaint. You know, unfortunately the dead end mold I really liked as a Stunticon, but again, much like Trailbreaker, I've never gotten a version of this mold that had solid hips, and because of the reuse now, the tabs aren't staying together as well. When you have to tab the legs together for transformation, it just flares apart, and it's just, you know, it sort of looks like Smokescreen. I mean, what a lot of people tend to forget is that Smokescreen was a rally car. I even think in G1, the original toy was a slight retool of Prowl and Blue Streak. This is just a straight repaint of the Prowl version of the mold. I even think it's the same head. It just falls flat with me, and if there's one figure you really should not have to kill yourself getting, it's going to be this guy. So let's take a quick look at the vehicle mode. And here's Smokescreen in its vehicle mode, and you know, there's no integrated limb module connection. the shotgun just pegs on the side, and what's even worse is they couldn't even remove the light bar from Prowl and Streetwise. I mean, they could have just used the dead end mold and repainted it, and I think it would have been fine, but it is what it is. I mean, the car rolls fine. You have the decals and painting, but like I said, I think this is the weakest version of the dead end mold and the weakest figure of this wave. Let me just say, I hate this mold. It worked fine as Breakdown, was intended to be Sunstreaker all along, and it's just pointless as Wheeljack, which is a shame because this figure actually has a lot of remolding and retooling on it to look like Wheeljack, and it's insane. They redid the feet to make it look like the front of the car. They redid the front of the car, which we'll see in a minute. The arms here have all been redone so they would panel and fit in. You have a whole new chest piece here. You have, besides the new head. The only problem is these stupid hips. They work on the same principle as Hound, Swindle, and Rook, and even the Legends class Shockwave has the exact same type of transformation, and it works a ton better. This figure just stinks. Now, I know people have complained about the lack of the paint. I really don't care about that. What I care about is the fact that it's a pain in the arse to transform. What I care about is that it's incredibly top-heavy. What I care about is that it takes forever to get the hips in a position that you want them to. This mold should be forgotten, but it's not. It's going to show up in Victorion. It's showing up at the BotCon. It's going to keep showing up in my nightmares, probably. And what's even worse, as I said at the beginning, and I'll probably end up mentioning this again, we're not even a calendar year, 12-month period removed from the release of Masterpiece Wheeljack. And it's what, a little over 2 years since we got the Generations Deluxe class version of Wheeljack. Those are two. I mean, there are plenty of Wheeljacks on the market. This figure did not need to be made. It can be used for another character, or how about giving us a proper combiner and not one of these hodgepodge. Okay. Let's take a look at the vehicle mode. Okay. I'm gonna, for all I said, I gotta admit, I like this vehicle mode. I like the work they put in at doing all the retooling, remolding to make this look like Wheeljack. And a lot of people have said that this looks like a better version of Wheeljack in vehicle mode. Outside of the Masterpiece, you still have the gimmicks in terms of weapon storage. The little tab on his gun sword can fit in there. And you can do the whole rigmarole pegging this into the back here, which was basically only designed to work with Sunstreaker and, stuff like that. You get the limbs, just like so. I should mention, with mine, there is a little bit of mold flash on the inside of the thumb notch, so things don't, and just closing it up, it doesn't work that bad. But hey, it looks nice, it rolls well, but the transformation stinks. I mean, not the leg part, the hips, the torso, I think it's really cool how the shoulders secure the head down. But just getting it from one mode to another is not fun. And, I should mention that there is going to be some gappage now due to the remolding. So don't worry about if you think things aren't lined up. It's just how the panels sit. So that's it for the limbs. Let's take a look at Lynx. Okay, and here's the most retentive Autobot ever in the history of mankind, Lynx. Aren't that be robot kind? Say what you will about the complaints that he might be a little too small. I know the little paws here are a little loose. You just saw me have to adjust one. That could also be I don't have the legs properly, rolled in a certain way, but it stands. Also, by the way, people are complaining about the box is made of paper. The instructions are made of paper. I've never noticed a change in the quality of the box or a change in the quality of instructions. So I don't know what you guys' problems are, but, you know, that's basically it. As you can see, as I mentioned, the little sword bits now peg onto the end of the tail, and this is where I gotta wag my finger at Hasbro. Tail could have been a little bit longer. I mean, the original toy had a nice expressive tail, and that was really made up the quality of the character. I do like the head here. You do have the opening mouth. I really like how they integrated everything, and I'm sure as many of you have heard, you really can't detach the shuttle. It's hollow. Pieces would be missing. You know, as you just saw, you can adjust the tail fins, you can adjust the tail, you can adjust these little blue parts. All in all, it's kind of fun. I really don't know, in terms of articulation, what you would want to do other than have it stand here or, you know, move the head down to talk to people, but let's take a look at shuttle mode. Okay, and here's Lynx in its shuttle mode, and it looks pretty cool. I mean, it is like an update to the G1 design. It looks a little more futuristic than the original toy. Keep in mind, the original toy was not designed by Hasbro or Takara. It came from a third company. So that's actually why for many, many years, until the Encore line, Japan never had a Lynx. And there are a few little nitpicks I have. There's really no locking point for these tail fins in the back, so if you butt nudge into them, you can knock them over. The legs, especially the back legs, the front legs are fine, but the back legs, there's really no pegging together or locking point here in the back. They're just held there by friction and the strength of the joints. This back section here, which would be the chest of the Skyrain mode, has a hard time pegging into the fuselage. Other than that, you know, there's really not much to it. You know, these little bits can peg under the wing. There's like slots on the side of the leg. It's really up to you. Personally, I think if you're going to buy this, you're buying it either for, because you just love Lynx, or you're getting it for the combined mode, which is interesting since it does have that animalistic head. So, we'll just pause here, and I'll be with you with my final thoughts. I figured for the ending here I'd do a little bit of the limb swap so you can see what the legs look like arms and the arms look like legs, but these molds have been around enough. This should all be very familiar. One thing I want to stress about the Lynx torso is that, I mean, I've had it for a while. Obviously, a lot of other people have rushed out their reviews. I wanted to take some time because I was hearing that there was a lot more to these figures than what was being let on, which we covered when we looked at them individually. But in that time, I can say that the one good thing about this torso is it doesn't suffer from the combiner lean, where you have when you have the arms raised, such as I have now, the torso tends to want to droop forward, so that you end up having to overcompensate. That happened on Superion, that happens with the Motormaster mold, that happens with the Hotspot mold. And it's really due to the fact that there's not enough teeth on the ratchet joints, so you have a little bit of wiggle between one tooth and the other, and that causes it to lean forward. And unfortunately would cause the figures to fall over and droop, which has been a common complaint in the whole of Combiner Wars. That doesn't happen here. With that said, I find it very difficult to recommend these figures. Yes, they're very cool looking, but in the case of Wheeljack and Smokescreen, we are less than a full calendar year from the release of their Masterpiece figures, which, for the cost of what it would be for these 5 figures, you could probably get one of them. You might even be able to get both of them. We're a little over a year removed from Trailbreaker's Generations figure, which I personally think might be a little bit better. It just doesn't have that molded-in cannon. And Hound, I mean, I'll be honest, I like this Hound a little bit better than the Classics, but everyone and their mother says the Classics Hound is like the definitive Hound. And you can still find it for a reasonable amount of price. And that's the whole thing. Like, every single figure in this wave, with the exception of Lynx, has a standard deluxe version that's a little bit bigger, that's not a combiner, and that I feel better encompasses what the character is. With that said, if you're a Combiner Wars completionist, I would say go ahead, pick these up, try to pay retail or less, do not pay aftermarket prices. If you're only going to buy one, I think Hound right down here has the best bang for your buck in terms of price value and what have you. But then again, if you only buy one, you end up shorting somebody else, possibly. You know, it's my whole little thing, but that's where I am. I mean, this is technically the last wave of Combiner Wars, and I have to be honest with you, it's basically the line has been unnecessary since Wave 2. It's all been repaints and slight retools, and I think we need to stop saying new heads count as a retool, because they don't. A retool is what you get when you take Rook and you get Swindle and Hound. It's just, you know, and they've even said it at Toy Fair that they had a budget. And to be honest, I would have if that was going to be the case, I would have rather we've gotten the Aerial Bots 1 year in a separate line, Stunticons another year. Now we've had all the figures, you know, all the combiners jammed in together when they could have been spaced out. And, you know, in my opinion, we probably could have gotten better versions if it was like a combiner a year. But who knows? I mean, we have box sets coming now, so, you know, they'll still be around in Titan Wars. This is your old pal Chuck for Skyrain. We will see you next time.